My guest today is Lindsay Doak, who is the lead researcher for BerryDunn, and I've asked her to join me to talk to you about the study that you have been hearing so much about for the last several months. It's called the National Healthcare at Home Best Practices Study, and many of you have responded to it, and the data is quite remarkable. Lindsay told me that she has gathered over 400,000 data points. So let's get right into it. This will be part one of a series as she gradually unveils to you the preview of the presentation that she's going to be giving later in October at the National Association for Home Care annual meeting. Lindsay, welcome to Home Care Tech Report.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So you have conducted this study based on generations of research that were started by your mentor, Dr. Robert Fazzi, correct?
Yes, yeah, he's also my neighbor, so I get to see him a lot, but he is my mentor as well, and he's the one who started the whole research scheme in home health and hospice, as you know. We worked with him back then, and this is a continuation. Did a lot of things different this time, but it's a continuation of that research.
So you have put together a list of questions and sent them out to what, owners or staffers, or who responded to your questionnaire?
Yeah, so I mean, it might be helpful to go through what the process of the study was to kind of get to that point of the actual survey, because I know that there's a lot of people probably watching this that were a part of that process. So what we actually started with was what was known as the input survey. And so for the input survey, we had, all of our sponsors. So that included National Association of Home Care, NHPCO, Leading Age, Home Care Association of America, and the Council of State, as well as individual state associations. They sent out a survey asking the industry, what would you like us to survey about? So we got 3,500 responses. So a lot of data to get through. 3,500 responses, but what came out of that were themes. And so we analyzed the data and we could see that there were themes. So regulations, pay practices, staffing shortages, all of those came out of the input survey. And then we took that input survey and those themes, and we met with our fantastic steering committee, and I do have to give them credit. So there are 47 members of the steering committee, and these were experts in all, as you reported in your Rowan report, these are experts in all areas. So we had a palliative care representation, hospice representation, home health representation. We had vendors, CEOs of large organizations, CEOs of small organizations, and we met as a big group the first time just to look at the themes. And then we met individually as subcommittees. And so the subcommittees met, and their goal was to come up with the questions that we were to ask on the survey. So in the end, all of the subcommittees met, and we ended up with, I think, about 350 questions per survey. And as you can imagine, it's a lot of questions. No, I give kudos to the people who filled it out, but nobody's going to fill out a 350 question survey. So we then met again, and we whittled that down to a lofty survey of 144 questions. There were 144 total questions on the survey. And then we distributed that mainly to CEOs, CFOs, executive directors of home health and hospice organizations of all sizes and all areas. Our goal was to get an agency per state, and we did that. Obviously some states had a little more representation than other states, but that's indicative of just where the density of the home health agencies are in general. And then large, small, for-profit, non-for-profit, we're really aggressive about making sure that all of the organizations and different structures of home health and hospice were represented.
144 questions is still quite a bit. How many people did you get to participate?
We actually got, I think we ended up with 830 home health agency sites who participated, and 300-ish hospice organizations that participated. Of those organizations that participated, we had to whittle the ones out that didn't have, we couldn't find a CCN. They didn't have home health compare data to compare it to. They didn't have even some cost report data that we could find. So what we ended up with was 781 home health agency sites where we had their data represented, and then 249 hospice sites that were represented in the final results.
So then that's still a substantial number, certainly enough to get a feel for the industry. So give me an idea of what you asked them. What there were different categories and types of questions that you wanted to learn about, and we're going to talk about each one of these in future episodes of this conversation. So kind of give us an overview of the topics that we're going to be hearing.
Yeah, so going back to that input survey and the themes, what we ended up with were home health best practices was one theme, hospice best practices was another theme. And so within best practices, what we're talking about are the pay practices, the staffing ratios, do you outsource your coding, do you outsource your billing, all of the things that run the operations of the organization. So those were the first two. Then we had staffing, recruitment, and retention, which obviously is a really big issue right now. Technology, which we haven't even had a chance to really dive into a lot of the technology results, but there was a significant portion of technology, specifically, as we know, telehealth. Telehealth was a significant overcoming over the past.
Don't worry, I will make sure that we get into that in detail in future episodes.
And I need to get that data in. And then palliative care. And then we also did have a public perception of home health and hospice subcommittee. It was a smaller committee, but we did also do that as well.
So the kinds of things that you found out with regard to best practices will be educational and informational to everyone who is in this sector of healthcare, not just the people who participated in the survey, correct?
Yeah, the results are free to the industry. You know, what we decided when we started this study was that we were at that moment, at the time of the start of the study, we hadn't heard yet about this proposed rule. So the critical thing going on was PDGM, a new payment model, VBID for hospice, and then of course, COVID and the staffing crisis. So what we had decided as a corporation through BerryDunn was that we would distribute the results complementary to the industry to help them adopt some of these best practices and help the industry grow. Our motto was always, we believe home care is the future of healthcare and we want to help it grow. And obviously now with the proposed payment cuts and all the other things going on, this is even more critical. You know, we're looking now at a deep dive into the financial impacts of different operational strategies and staffing metrics and those types of things, because as we all know, the 7% cuts will be detrimental to our industry. And so we're trying to look at that. Hopefully it does not happen, we hope. But obviously now with a fresh perspective of that. And what we do with the results, just to share with the audience here, was in addition to the 144 questions, which is a lot, we're not just reporting out on who answered which questions. So how many of you answered, you have caseloads of X or Y. We correlate the data with 3 different data points. The first is home health and hospice compare. So we look and see if there's any correlation between the questions and star ratings for patient satisfaction, star ratings for quality of care. And then also I've started to take a deeper dive into rehospitalization. So really taking a look at what is impacting rehospitalization. And then we look at the claims data. So we compare it to the claims data to look at things like, you know, the length of stay for hospice and the different, you know, functional scores and those types of things that impact PDGM. So we took a look at that. And then of course the cost report, we take a look at to see how it's impacting their cost per discipline, their overall surplus and those types of things. So all of those things come together because as we know within an organization, you have to be looking at your quality and your outcomes and your financial outcomes as well. So we're trying to look at best practices that kind of are key to moving the dials in all those areas.
So by doing that, you can compare practices to the results, the effects of those practices on profitability, on star ratings, patient satisfaction. I don't know if a study like that has ever been done before that is as comprehensive as that.
Not to this level. I know when we've done this in the past, we've like looked at quadrants. So who's in the top quadrant, who's in the bottom quadrant. And we do that. So we have home health and hospice centers of excellence. And the home health centers of excellence are those agencies that score in the top 10% for quality and patient satisfaction. So that ends up being about a 4.5 star rating in both those categories, which, as you know from the curve, is pretty difficult to achieve. So they're doing something right by achieving the 4.5 and higher, especially in patient satisfaction. And then for hospice, what we did, and we're still waiting for the star ratings, which are supposed to come out any minute now. But we took the calculations of the CAPS composite that CMS is going to be using to calculate those star ratings, and we weighted them the same. Now, obviously, that we can't wait for type of survey if it was phone or paper, which they will be doing, but we kind of can come up with an indication for which organizations are going to have higher star ratings than lower star ratings. And so we correlated it with that, and those are our hospice centers of excellence. So what is it the home health centers of excellence and the hospice centers of excellence are doing? And then we compare that to everybody else, and particularly the bottom, so the opposite of the home health and the hospice centers of excellence. And we make sure that it's not just one data point. You know, if you say, oh, wow, look, this caseload results in 5 stars, but then you can take a look at the low performing and you say, oh, no, it's more than that. So a lot of this data that we came up with is like 30, not too many. We're not saying you have to do these 42 things, but like 2 or 3 things combined that really move the needle. It's like one thing might not get you quite there, but if you do this plus this, then that's what's going to get you to that 5-star rating.
So we're going to go through each of these primary data points and your most important findings over a series of these video interviews between now and the NAC meeting at the end of October. But to kind of conclude and maybe give a teaser today for what's coming, give us an idea of what you would say was your biggest surprise. What did you learn from the survey that made you run to somebody else's desk and say, look at this?
Yeah, you know, it was obviously some people have probably seen some of these in the presentations I've done, but it was really drilling into those caseloads, both for home health and hospice, because the reason why we yelled, what is this, is because, you know, for home health, it remains somewhat stable, but for hospice, those caseloads change dramatically. You know, some increased significantly and some decreased significantly. And then getting to the bottom of what happened to cause that change. And so there's, as you've heard, there are 400,000 data points that we collected throughout the process of the study. So there's a lot of data that we had to drill into, but once you get to that aha moment of, oh, so this is what organizations, they shifted. And I do want to point out that when you look at the home health and hospice centers of excellence, one of the things that stands out is that they're innovative and they shift their practices based on what's occurring in the industry right now. You know, I know that some people might be stuck on some processes that were solidified 7 years ago. We are not where we were 7 years ago as an industry. And so these organizations have figured out staffing shortages. Okay, we have a clinician shortage right now. How do we overcome that? And then diving into that to see how they overcame that and what they're doing with their staffing ratios and how they're shifting their operations to accommodate so they can still take care of the patients and maintain quality and patient satisfaction and revenue, but are changing and shifting their organization to be able to do that.
So give me a couple of numbers. I think I remember what you, when I saw your last presentation, there is a caseload number that if it's too low, it decreases your star rating. And if it's too high, it decreases it. And you found a sweet spot, is that right?
Yeah, for the caseloads, that sweet spot ended up to be about 20 to 25 for RN case manager caseloads. You know, the 19 or less actually was okay, but then when you dived into it, the obviously the revenue didn't follow it. So there was a revenue impact there. But that 20 to 25 was the sweet spot. The most interesting thing about that 20 to 25 is that once you go past that 20 to 25, that's where you're in trouble. So I actually went through and looked individually at all the organizations that said they had caseloads more than 25 just to make sure that we were onto something. And 90% of them had significant drops in their quality and their patient satisfaction, which tells us we're onto something. You know, you can't go past 25. And so then you have to figure out how do you staff so that you can meet those 20 to 25 ratios.
So overloading your RN case managers is not a solution. It does not help you with star ratings. And what about profitability? What about PDGM margins?
Yeah, so the PDGM margins, of course, you have to maintain that 20 to 25, but then that, what we saw correlated most to that was that productivity measure. So the margins with higher product, no brainer, right? So the higher your productivity, the higher your margins or your lower your costs per visit are. But that's where that sweet spot is. So once you get past 5 for productivity, you are significantly going to impact your quality and your patient satisfaction. But we saw that 5 was pretty good. It stayed at about a 4 to 4.5 star rating. And then the surprising part was that 4 and under actually had lower patient satisfaction scores, which we did do another dive into that. So, you know, I know when we started the steering committee discussion, there were 2 thoughts right out of the gate. Increased productivity decreases your quality, and paying per visit per diem decreases your quality. And what we basically concluded from the study was that neither of those cases were true. Like, you can maintain those obviously with the correct support, and that's where that 20 to 25 ratio and the correct leadership models and those sorts of things. But you can support those 2 models and maintain your quality and your patient satisfaction scores.
I can see that there is going to be a wealth of information, useful information coming out of this study. And that first piece that you've just given us, it surprised me when I first heard it. And I think it's going to be helpful for everybody who digs into your study and compares it with their own practices. And that's what you're supposed to do as a business owner, right? You can always benchmark yourself against best practices. In the past, we haven't always known for sure what best practices are, but with 400,000 data points, I think you're getting there. I think we are going to be able to make recommendations.
Yeah, and that was our hope. That was our hope. You know, we wanted to be able to hand this to the industry. You know, we are inundated with care, COVID, regulations. If there's one thing that we could hand the industry saying, here you go, you know, if you incorporate a couple of these things, this should help. That was the purpose, and that was what we are trying to do with this study. And so, as you mentioned, there's a lot more to come, and I know we're going to be doing some videos on that, but we have a lot more data to get through, and we'll be coming up with more of those key metrics.
And I want to make sure that everybody knows exactly how to take advantage of the rest of these video interviews that I'm going to be doing with you as we gradually lay out your findings. The best way to do it is to check on the Home Care Tech Report, the Rowan Report website. Don't wait for your regular email to arrive telling you that some new articles have been posted. You can check the website at homecaretechreport.com. And we're going to be trying to bring these to you every week or so between now and the end of October. So keep close tabs on my website, and you will be able to learn a great deal about best practices from Lindsay Doak. Lindsay, I can't thank you enough for joining me.
No,
and I really look forward to learning more as we go through this.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll talk to you next time. I'm Tim Rowan, and this is a series of interviews about the National Healthcare at Home Best Practices Study by BerryDunn.